Doyen stared at the translation screen and rubbed his tired eyes. 3 weeks on the horizon's edge, and he still couldn't get the computer to properly translate Velrathi communication. The symbols shifted and changed, never quite making sense. "You should rest," Captain Taiyang said from the doorway. "You've been here for 12 hours. "Just a few more minutes," Doyun replied, not looking up from his work. Taiyang sighed and left him alone. Doyun appreciated that about his friend. Taiyang knew when to push and when to let things be. The Velrathi were unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. Their ships had appeared 6 months ago, broadcasting peaceful intentions across multiple frequencies. The first contact protocols had gone smoothly. No weapons, no threats, just calm negotiation. Now the real work began, learning to actually talk to each other. Doyun was one of 5 linguists assigned to the mission. His specialty was pattern recognition and nonverbal communication. He'd learned 17 Earth languages and could pick up new ones within weeks. But the Velrathi were different. They didn't just speak. They glowed. Their skin held bioluminescent patterns that shifted constantly. Blues, greens, purples, and sometimes brilliant golds. The science team said these lights were their primary communication method. The Velrathi also made sounds, deep vibrations that human ears could barely detect. Dr. Yuna, the medical officer, had measured them. Subsonic frequencies, she called them. Too low for humans to hear properly. The scientists were certain about one thing: the Velrathi couldn't hear human speech. Their crystalline auditory organs, the specialists said, only picked up frequencies far above what humans could produce. It made sense. Different biology, different senses. The Velrathi probably thought humans were deaf to their sounds too, so all communication happened through computers. Type a message, wait for the AI to translate it into light patterns, watch the Velrathi respond with their own lights, wait for the computer to turn it back into text. Slow, clumsy, but it worked. Velira was the Velrathi assigned to work with Doyun. She was their cultural ambassador, tasked with helping humans understand Velrathi society. Every day she came to the linguistics lab. Every day they sat together in careful silence, building a dictionary 1 word at a time. She was beautiful. Doyun had admitted that to himself after the first week. Not beautiful in a human way, but in a way that made his chest tight when she entered the room. She stood nearly 7 feet tall, with long limbs that moved with incredible grace. Her skin was a deep midnight blue, and the patterns that danced across it were mesmerizing. When she was calm, they moved slowly, like waves on a dark ocean. When she was focused, they pulsed in rapid geometric shapes. Doyun didn't know if she was considered attractive by her own people's standards. He didn't know if Velrathi even had such concepts. But he knew he looked forward to their sessions more than anything else in his day. He tried to stay professional. This was first contact, the most important work humanity had ever done. His personal feelings were irrelevant, inappropriate even. He never spoke about it to anyone. He barely admitted it to himself. The door slid open. Velira entered, her movements as fluid as always. Her light patterns shifted to a soft green, a color Doyen had started to associate with greeting or acknowledgement. He nodded to her and gestured to her usual seat across from him. They worked in comfortable silence. Doyen pulled up images of human activities and typed descriptions. Velira studied them, then responded with her own light patterns. The computer translated, added the new terms to their growing database. Slowly, very slowly, they were building a bridge between their peoples. Hours passed. Doyen's back ached from sitting. He stood and stretched, walking to the window. Outside, the Velrathi homeworld hung in space, a planet of deep purples and blues, with swirling clouds that glowed faintly in the darkness. 3 moons orbited it, each one a different color. Beautiful. alien, home to beings he desperately wanted to understand. Behind him, Velira remained at the console, her long fingers moving across the holographic display. She was reviewing the day's work, her light patterns cycling through different colors as she read. The blue of her skin deepened when she concentrated. Doyen had noticed that. He'd noticed a lot of small things about her. The way she tilted her head when she was curious. The way her patterns flared brighter when she was pleased with their progress. The gentle, almost musical quality of her subsonic sounds, even though he could barely hear them. He'd asked Dr. Yuna once if there was equipment that could shift those frequencies into human hearing range. Yuna had laughed and said, "Why? She can't understand us anyway." That was true. The Velrathi couldn't hear human speech. The scientists had been very clear about that. It made everything easier in a way. Doyen could talk to himself in the lab without worrying about disturbing her. He could think out loud in Korean, processing his thoughts without the translation barrier. It was late in the ship's night cycle now. Most of the crew was asleep. The lab was quiet except for the soft hum of the environmental systems and the occasional subsonic pulse from Velira. Doyen watched her work, her back to him, her attention completely absorbed in the data. In this moment, with no one else around, and nothing but the vast darkness of space outside, Doyen felt something shift in his chest. A warmth, a longing for something he couldn't name. She was so focused, so dedicated to this bridge they were building. She'd spent weeks in this room with him, patiently teaching, patiently learning, never showing frustration at the slow pace. The words came before he could stop them. Soft, barely a breath. In Korean, the language of his childhood, the language of his heart. She's perfect. He said it to the empty air, to himself, to no one. A confession that went nowhere and meant nothing. Just a man speaking a truth he'd never say aloud if anyone could hear. Across the room, Velira's light patterns flickered. A quick shift from blue to gold and back again. Doyen didn't notice. He'd already turned back to the window, lost in his own thoughts, unaware that everything had just changed. Something had changed, though Doyen couldn't quite figure out what. Velira arrived at the lab the next morning as always, her light patterns showing the soft green of greeting. But there was something different in the way she moved. More deliberate, more attentive. She positioned herself closer to him than usual as they worked. Not uncomfortably close, but close enough that Doyen noticed. Her light patterns seemed brighter too, warmer colors, golds and soft oranges mixed with her usual blues and greens. He wondered if it meant something in Velrathi communication. He made a note to ask the computer to analyze the shift. "Good progress yesterday," Taeyang said when he stopped by during the afternoon shift. He studied the data on Doyun's screen. "The database is really growing." "Velira is a good teacher," Doyun replied. Across the room, Velira's patterns pulsed, a quick flash of gold, strange. Over the next few days, the pattern continued. Velira seemed more engaged, more present. She brought items from her quarters, small objects that she wanted to teach him about. A crystalline structure that sang when touched. A fabric that changed colors with temperature. A device that projected holographic star maps. Dr. Yuna noticed it too. "Your Velrathi friend seems very comfortable with you," she commented during a routine medical check. "The other teams aren't seeing this level of interaction." Doyen's heart jumped a little at that. "Really?" "Really. The Velrathi working with the other linguists are polite but distant. Velira seems to actually enjoy your sessions." Yuna smiled. "Maybe you're just naturally good at this." Doyen tried not to read too much into it. Professional relationship, cultural exchange, nothing more. But then came the ceremony. 2 weeks after that night in the lab, the Velrathi invited the human crew to their homeworld for a formal cultural exchange. It would be humanity's first time setting foot on an alien planet. The excitement on the ship was electric. They shuttled down to the surface in groups. Doyen stood with Tai Yang and the other linguists as they stepped out onto Velrathi soil for the first time. The air was thicker than Earth's, humid and warm. The sky was a deep purple, and plants that glowed softly in the twilight surrounded them. A whole city of Velrathi architecture spread before them, buildings that curved and spiraled, made of something that looked like crystal and metal fused together. Hundreds of Velrathi gathered in a great plaza to meet them. Their collective light patterns created a display more beautiful than anything Doyun had ever seen. Waves of color rolled through the crowd like auroras made flesh. Velira stood at the front with other ambassadors. When she saw Doyen, her patterns flared bright gold. He felt his face grow warm and told himself it meant nothing. Just a greeting, just acknowledgement. The ceremony began with speeches, delivered through computer translation, projected on screens for both species to read. Velrathi leaders welcomed humanity. Human diplomats thanked them for their hospitality, all very formal, all very careful. Then came the cultural demonstrations. Velrathi musicians performed, creating harmonies from their subsonic vibrations that humans could feel more than hear. It made Doyun's bones resonate in a way that was both unsettling and beautiful. Human performers followed, playing recorded symphonies and displaying art from Earth. Velira stepped forward. According to the translated program, she would perform a traditional Velrathi ritual of welcome. Something personal, the text said, meant to honor the guests. She moved to the center of the plaza. Her light patterns dimmed until she was almost dark. Then slowly, they began to build. Colors bloomed across her skin in intricate designs. She moved her arms in graceful gestures, and the lights followed her movements, creating shapes in the air that seemed to linger even after she'd moved on. It was hypnotic. The whole plaza fell silent, both human and Velrathi watching in rapt attention. Doyen couldn't look away. This was her, unfiltered, expressing something deep in her own cultural language. He didn't understand the meaning, but he felt the emotion behind it. The display reached a crescendo, brilliant golds and whites flooding across her skin like sunrise. Then it faded, leaving her in soft blue calm. The plaza erupted in appreciation. Velrathi light patterns flashed in what Doyen had learned was their version of applause. Humans clapped, the sound strange and sharp in the alien air. Velira stood still for a moment, her patterns cycling through colors. Then she turned to face Doyen directly. She took a breath. He could see her chest rise and fall, and then she spoke. Not in lights, not in subsonic vibrations. In words, human words, Korean words. "Thank you," she said, her voice melodic but halting, clearly unused to forming these sounds. "For your words." The plaza went dead silent. Doyen felt his blood turn to ice. His mind raced, refusing to accept what he'd just heard. Around him, the other humans were frozen in shock. Someone dropped something. The clatter echoed across the plaza. "What?" Taiyang started to say. Velira's patterns shifted to soft purple. She looked directly at Doyen, and even without understanding her light language, he could read concern in her posture. Dr. Yuna found her voice first. "How? How can you speak Korean?" The Velrathi ambassadors were signaling to each other, their lights flashing in what looked like urgent conversation. Finally, one of them approached a translation terminal and began entering information. The screen lit up with text. "We apologize for the confusion. We can hear your spoken language." "We always could." The words hit Doyen like a physical blow. Could hear. Always could. "But the scientists said—" One of the other linguists started. More text appeared. "We believed you could not hear our primary communication. Your scientists seemed very certain of their equipment. We assumed this was a mutual limitation and did not think to correct the misunderstanding. Doyen's hands were shaking. His mind was replaying every moment he'd spent in that lab. Every time he'd talked to himself in Korean. Every time he'd thought out loud. Every complaint about the difficult work. Every frustrated curse. Every whispered confession. Oh God, she'd heard him say it. She's perfect. She'd been right there, and she'd heard him. His face burned with humiliation. He wanted to disappear, to run back to the shuttle and never come back. Velira took a step toward him, her hand raised in what might have been a placating gesture. Her light patterns were cycling through colors he'd never seen before. Was that distress? Apology? Doyun did the only thing he could think of. He turned and walked away, pushing through the crowd of confused humans and bewildered Velrathi. He heard Tai Yang call his name, but he didn't stop. He couldn't face her, couldn't face any of them. Behind him, Velira's light patterns flared brilliant white, a color that, if he'd been looking, he might have recognized as grief. Doyun spent 2 days hiding in his quarters. He told Tai Yang he was sick. Not entirely a lie, he felt sick with embarrassment every time he thought about facing Velira again. The ship was in chaos. Emergency meetings ran constantly. Scientists scrambled to understand how they'd gotten it so wrong. Diplomats worried about what other misunderstandings might exist. Had they offended the Velrathi without knowing? Had the Velrathi been laughing at humanity's ignorance? You need to talk to her, Tai Yang said, standing in Doyun's doorway on the 3rd day. She's been asking about you. I can't. Doyun stared at his ceiling. Do you understand what this means? She heard everything, every stupid thing I said, every... He couldn't finish the sentence. So you said she was perfect. Is that really so terrible? It's unprofessional. It's inappropriate. This is first contact, Taeyang. I'm supposed to be a representative of humanity, not some... He waved his hand helplessly. Some what? Some person with feelings? Taeyang sat on the edge of the bed. Do-yun. I've known you for 8 years. You never let yourself have anything. You're always the professional, always the dedicated worker. Maybe it's okay to be human for once. Not with an alien ambassador during the most important mission in human history. Taeyang sighed. She requested to speak with you, officially, through diplomatic channels. You can't avoid her forever. Do-yun closed his eyes. What did she say? Nothing. Just that she wants to meet with you privately. She's waiting in conference room 3. Taeyang stood. I told her you'd be there in 20 minutes. Don't make me a liar. He left before Doyun could protest. Doyun sat up slowly. His reflection in the mirror looked terrible. Dark circles under his eyes, hair a mess. He cleaned himself up, put on a fresh uniform, and tried to prepare himself for the most awkward conversation of his life. Conference room 3 was small and quiet. Velira stood by the window, looking out at her homeworld below. Her light patterns were subdued, soft blues and grays that reminded Doyun of a cloudy sky. He cleared his throat. She turned quickly, her patterns brightening to green and gold. Thank you for coming, she said in Korean. Her accent was thick, but the words were clear. She'd been practicing. I'm sorry I ran away, Doyun said. He forced himself to look at her, though shame burned in his chest. That was childish. No. She moved closer, her movements careful. I am the one who should apologize. I should have told you sooner that we could hear. I should have corrected the misunderstanding immediately. Why didn't you? Velira's patterns shifted through several colors before settling on a soft orange. At first, we were curious. We wanted to see how humans behaved when they thought we could not hear. It was research. She paused, clearly searching for the right words. But then I started working with you, and I realized the misunderstanding was causing no harm. You were always respectful, always kind, and Her patterns pulsed. I wanted to keep listening. Doyen felt his heart beating faster. You wanted to spy on me? No, not spy. I wanted to... She made a frustrated sound. Your language is difficult. In my culture, we do not practice our words. We cannot hide our true feelings because our light patterns show them always. When a Velrathi speaks carefully, plans their words, we know they are performing. It has no real meaning. She gestured to herself, her patterns brightening. But you humans, you hide your true feelings behind careful words. You perform for each other constantly. The only time I heard real truth from you was when you thought no one could hear. When you talked to yourself in Korean. Doyen felt something shift in his understanding. So when I said those things, you meant them. Velira's patterns flowed into warm gold. That is what made them beautiful. That is what made them matter. In my culture, the words you whispered that night, those are more valuable than 1,000 prepared speeches. He sat down slowly, his legs suddenly weak. I don't understand. Velira sat across from him. She held out her arm, and the patterns on her skin began to move in slow, deliberate shapes. This is how I felt when I first met you, she said. The patterns were a cautious green with hints of blue, curious but reserved. The colors shifted. This is how I felt after 1 week. Warmer now, more gold threading through the blue. This is how I felt when you whispered those words. Her entire arm blazed brilliant gold and white, so bright Doyen had to squint. This is how I feel now. The light was warm on his skin. He stared at her, trying to process what she was showing him. You're saying you feel the same way? I have been trying to tell you for 2 weeks, Velira said softly. But I did not know how to speak it in words you would understand. In my culture, I would simply show my colors and you would know. But you cannot read my patterns yet. Teach me, Doyen said before he could think better of it. Teach me to understand. Velira's patterns brightened even more. Over the next hour, she taught him the basics. Gold meant joy, affection, warmth. Blue was calm, peace, contentment. Green was curiosity or greeting. Red was anger or danger. She rarely showed red, she explained. Purple was sadness or concern. White was intensity, any emotion at its peak. And when your patterns mix? Doyun asked. Like gold and blue together? Happy and peaceful. Content. She demonstrated, her skin showing gentle waves of both colors. This is what I feel during our work sessions. Doyen felt something warm blooming in his chest. I thought I was being so careful, so professional. But the whole time, you knew exactly how I felt. Yes. And I was trying to show you how I felt, but you could not see it. Velira's patterns pulsed with what might have been amusement. We were both trying to communicate across a barrier that did not exist. I was an idiot. You were human. You thought you were speaking to yourself. That is the most honest thing a person can do. Doyen reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. His hand hovered near hers. She closed the distance, her long fingers wrapping gently around his. Her skin was warm and smooth, and where they touched, her patterns pulsed in brilliant gold. Is this okay? He asked. In your culture, is this appropriate? In my culture, hiding true feelings is the only inappropriate thing. She squeezed his hand gently. You showed me your truth. I am showing you mine. They sat together in the quiet room, hands linked, her patterns cycling through the most beautiful colors Doyun had ever seen. For the first time since the ceremony, he felt the knot of anxiety in his chest begin to loosen. I still can't believe you could hear us all along, he said. The scientists were so sure. Your scientists used their tools and trusted the results. Our scientists did the same. Both were so confident in their knowledge that they never thought to simply try speaking and see what happened. Velira's patterns flickered with blue, calm acceptance. Sometimes the best tools are the simplest ones. Sometimes you must just open your mouth and speak honestly. Doyen laughed, a real laugh for the first time in days. I think I understand now why you value unguarded truth so much. It really is the most important thing. Yes, Velira said, her patterns glowing warm and bright. Yes, it is. The next 2 weeks were the happiest of Doyen's life. He and Velira worked together every day, but now there were no barriers between them. She taught him to read her light patterns. He taught her more Korean, more English, more about human culture and emotion. They shared meals, her people's glowing fruits and his carefully prepared Korean dishes from the ship's synthesizer. The other crew members noticed the change. Some smiled and seemed happy for them. Others whispered and looked concerned. Doyen tried not to care. For once in his life, he was letting himself feel something without overthinking it. Then Jisoo arrived. She came on a fast transport from Earth, sent by the Colonial Administration Bureau. Doyen had never met her, but her reputation preceded her. Tough, calculating, focused on results and resource acquisition. She was the type of administrator who saw first contact as an opportunity for advantage rather than understanding. We need to discuss the Velrathi situation, she announced in her first meeting with the senior staff. Doyen had been called in as the lead linguist. Velira attended as well, standing quietly in the corner, her patterns subdued. What situation? Taeyang asked carefully. Jisoo pulled up a star chart. The Velrathi homeworld sits in a region rich with rare minerals, elements we desperately need for our expansion efforts. We need to establish favorable trade agreements before they realize what they're sitting on. They already know what resources they have, Dr. Yuna said. They're not primitive, but they may not know what we're willing to pay for them. Jisoo smiled. That's where good negotiation comes in. Doyen felt his stomach turn. This was exactly what he'd feared. Humanity approaching first contact as a business transaction. We also need to address the inappropriate fraternization happening between our staff and theirs, Jisoo continued, looking directly at Doyen. It compromises our negotiating position. Excuse me? Doyen's voice came out sharper than he intended. Your relationship with the Velrathi ambassador, it's become common knowledge. It makes you look weak, emotionally compromised. Velira's patterns flashed red for the first time Doyen had ever seen. Anger. Doyen has done nothing inappropriate, she said in careful Korean. Our connection is based on mutual respect and honesty. That's exactly the problem, Jisoo replied through the translator. Honesty is not always the best policy in diplomacy. Sometimes we need to present a unified strategic front. The meeting ended badly. Jisoo made it clear she would be taking over the negotiation process. Doyen and the other scientists would continue their cultural research, but all political and economic discussions would go through her. That night, Doyen couldn't sleep. He found Velira in one of the observation decks, her patterns cycling through dark purples and blues. She wants to use us, Velira said quietly. Use our friendship to gain advantage in trade. I won't let that happen. You may not have a choice. Velira's patterns pulsed with sadness. My people have concerns too. One of our council members, Thelvan, believes humans cannot be trusted. He says your people hide too much, that your spoken words don't match your true intentions. That's not fair. Not all humans are like Jisoo. I know, but Thelvan has influence. He is pushing the council to limit contact between our peoples until we better understand your motives. Over the next few days, things deteriorated rapidly. Jisoo pushed for aggressive trade terms. Thelvan responded by withdrawing Velrathi cooperation. Communication sessions were cancelled. The warm welcome humanity had received turned cold. Then came the accusations. Someone leaked communication logs, heavily edited versions, that made it look like the humans had been discussing ways to deceive the Velrathi about the value of their resources. At the same time, similar logs appeared showing Velrathi discussing how to extract maximum concessions from the eager humans. Both sides erupted in outrage. Had they been spying on each other? Had this whole friendship been a manipulation? Doyun knew immediately something was wrong. He'd seen the original logs. These versions were altered, taken out of context, twisted to show the worst possible interpretation. Someone is sabotaging the talks, he told Taiyang. Both sides, making us distrust each other. But who benefits from that? Doyun thought about it. Anyone who wants the negotiations to fail, anyone who wants humanity and the Velrathi to remain separate. He dug deeper, using his access to the ship's systems. There, routing information showing the leaked logs had been sent from a terminal in the Colonial Administration section. Jisu's team. But there was also evidence of tampering from the Velrathi side, from terminals associated with Thelvan's faction. They were working together. Both wanted the alliance to fail, just for different reasons. Jisu wanted conflict so she could justify harder tactics. Thelvan wanted isolation so he could maintain his position opposing alien contact. We need to expose this, Taeyang said. No one will listen, Doyun replied. Both sides are too angry now, too suspicious. We need something that cuts through the manipulation, something undeniable. An idea formed in his mind. Dangerous, possibly career-ending, but it might be the only way. I need to make a broadcast, he said. Direct to the Velrathi homeworld. No filters, no translation algorithms. Just me speaking in Korean, knowing they can hear every word. That's against protocol. Jisu will never authorize it. I'm not asking for authorization. That night, Doyun hacked into the communication array. He knew he'd be caught, probably court-martialed, but none of that mattered if he could stop this entire alliance from collapsing. He opened a channel directly to the Velrathi homeworld, broadcasting on frequencies he knew they could hear. Then he began to speak, in Korean, from his heart, with no script, no preparation, just raw, honest truth. He told them about the manipulated logs, about Jisu and Thelvan's conspiracy, about how fear and greed were being used to drive their peoples apart. He confessed his own fears, that he wasn't smart enough, brave enough, good enough to bridge the gap between species, that he'd fallen for someone so different from himself that it terrified him, that despite all of it, he believed in the possibility of genuine connection. I don't know if what Valera and I have means anything in the grand scheme of things, he said, his voice raw with emotion. Maybe it's just two individuals finding something beautiful in each other. But I have to believe it matters. I have to believe that honesty and vulnerability and courage to reach across the darkness, that these things are stronger than fear and manipulation. He finished speaking and sat back, exhausted. Within minutes, alarms started blaring. Security was on their way. He'd violated so many regulations he'd probably spend years dealing with the consequences. Then every screen in the communications room lit up at once. Valira's face appeared, transmitted from the planet's surface. Behind her, thousands of Velrathi stood in the plaza where they'd first held the ceremony. Their light patterns blazed in the darkness, brilliant golds and whites that lit up the night sky. She spoke in Korean, her voice clear and strong. We hear you, Doyun. We have always heard you, and we choose to believe in the same things you do. The display was visible from orbit, a declaration of trust made in light that could be seen across space, undeniable, unmistakable, true. The security team arrived and found Doyun staring at the screens, tears running down his face, but they didn't arrest him. They just stood there, watching the light show from the planet below, understanding what it meant. Everything had changed again, but this time it was changing in the right direction. The response to Doyun's broadcast came faster than anyone expected. Within hours, both human and Velrathi populations demanded answers about the manipulated logs. Jisoo and Thelvan tried to defend themselves, but the evidence was overwhelming. They'd worked together to manufacture distrust, each for their own purposes. Both were removed from their positions. The human government recalled Jisoo to Earth in disgrace. The Velrathi Council stripped Thelvan of his authority and exiled him from the capital. The investigations revealed that their conspiracy had been small, just a handful of people on each side who feared what genuine cooperation might mean. But the damage they'd almost caused was massive. "We came so close to destroying everything," Taeyang said as he and Doyun watched the sunrise from the observation deck. "Over lies and fear." "But we didn't," Doyun replied. He was exhausted but relieved. The disciplinary hearing for his unauthorized broadcast had resulted in a formal reprimand and nothing more. Turned out saving the entire First Contact mission earned you some forgiveness. We chose truth instead. The real work began after that. Both species committed to complete transparency. New protocols were established. Every major communication would be recorded and made available to the public. No more private channels where conspiracy could breed. It was risky, leaving everything so open, but both sides agreed it was necessary. Joint scientific teams formed to study the communication breakdown that had started it all. What they discovered was both embarrassing and enlightening. The human scientists had relied entirely on their instruments. They'd measured Velrathi auditory organs, analyzed the frequencies, and concluded that human speech was outside their hearing range. The instruments weren't wrong. They just didn't tell the whole story. Velrathi hearing was more complex than any tool could measure, operating across multiple spectrums simultaneously. The Velrathi scientists had made the same mistake in reverse. They'd studied human hearing, measured the frequencies humans responded to best, and assumed that humans couldn't detect Velrathi subsonic communication. Technically true, but missing the larger point. Humans could hear plenty of frequencies within Velrathi speech range. Both sides had just never tried talking directly. Pride, Dr. Yuna explained during one of the joint presentations. Both species were so confident in their technology and knowledge that they never considered the simple solution. Just try talking and see what happens. It became the foundation of new First Contact protocols. Before using any instruments or analysis, just try direct communication. Try every method possible. Don't assume anything about what another species can or cannot perceive. The story of Doyun's whispered confession spread across both worlds. On Earth, it became a symbol of human capacity for emotional honesty and vulnerability. On the Velrathi homeworld, it was celebrated as an example of the unguarded truth their culture valued most. Some humans found it embarrassing. Too personal, too revealing. Some Velrathi found it confusing. Why had he hidden his feelings in the first place? But most saw it for what it was. A moment of genuine connection that had broken through barriers of culture, biology, and fear. Doyun and Velira became unofficial ambassadors for the new era of cooperation. They traveled between the homeworlds, demonstrating the hybrid communication system they'd developed together. Korean words mixed with Velrathi light patterns and subsonic harmonics, a true fusion of both cultures. "Show them the greeting," Velira would say during their presentations, and Doyun would speak in Korean while her patterns flowed in synchronized response. The effect was beautiful, language and light, dancing together in perfect harmony. They weren't the only cross-species friendship that developed, but they were the first. Their relationship, whatever it was, Neither species had quite figured out how to categorize it, opened doors for others. Human crew members began learning light pattern language. Velrathi started speaking human languages, their musical voices creating new accents and pronunciations. Trade agreements were reached, but fairly, with both sides negotiating in good faith. Cultural exchange programs flourished. The Velrathi shared their advanced bioluminescent technology. Humans offered their art, music, and literature, things the Velrathi found endlessly fascinating. 6 months after the ceremony, Doyen stood in a garden on the Velrathi homeworld. It was a quiet place, far from the cities, where glowing plants created a natural cathedral of light. Vel-Ira had brought him here during one of their visits. "This is where I come when I need to think," she said, her patterns showing the blue of peace and contentment. "Where I come to be honest with myself." Doyen looked around at the alien beauty surrounding them. 6 months ago, he'd been terrified of this world, this species, these feelings. Now he felt more at home here than anywhere else. "I never thanked you," he said. "For what?" "For hearing me. For understanding what I meant even when I didn't understand it myself." Velira's patterns shifted to warm gold. "I never thanked you for speaking, for being brave enough to say what was in your heart, even when you thought no one could hear. It wasn't brave. I thought I was alone. That's what made it brave." She moved closer, her light patterns creating shadows that danced across the glowing plants. "True courage is not knowing if anyone will hear you and speaking anyway. You did that twice, once in the lab and once when you broadcast to my world. Both times you changed everything." Doyen thought about that first night in the linguistics lab, how he'd whispered those 2 words into what he thought was empty air. How that one moment of unguarded honesty had started a chain of events that changed the course of 2 civilizations. Around them, other humans and Velrathi moved through the garden, no longer separated by misunderstanding, no longer afraid of what they couldn't comprehend. They walked together, talked together, learned from each other. "We're going to be okay," Doyun whispered in Korean, watching them. Velira responded in the same language, her accent better now after months of practice. "We already are." Her light patterns glowed in a frequency Doyen had learned to recognize, the Velrathi equivalent of laughter, joy, hope. He took her hand, and her patterns brightened even more, gold and white mixing in brilliant display. In the distance, a group of human children ran through the garden, chasing Velrathi younglings whose patterns flickered in excited greens and golds. They played some game that neither species had invented, something new that they'd created together. The story of a whispered confession had become legend on both worlds. It was told to children as a lesson about honesty. It was studied by scholars as an example of communication breakthrough. It was celebrated by artists in paintings and poems and songs that mixed human and Velrathi elements. But for Doyun, it was simply the truth. A moment when he'd spoken from his heart without thinking, without filtering, without fear of judgment, the most human thing he could have done. And it had been enough, more than enough. The evening sky darkened to deep purple, and the 3 moons began to rise, one gold, one blue, one silver. The garden's bioluminescent plants responded, brightening to match. Velira's patterns pulsed in harmony with the natural light around them. "Perfect," Doyen said softly. This time, he said it loud enough for her to hear. This time, he meant for her to hear it. This time, there were no misunderstandings, no barriers, no hidden meanings. Just truth, spoken between 2 people who'd learned to understand each other across the vast darkness of space. Velira's patterns blazed brilliant gold and white, happiness at its peak. She squeezed his hand gently. "Yes," she agreed in Korean, her voice filled with warmth. "Perfect." And in that moment, surrounded by the light of an alien world and the warmth of genuine connection, Doyun knew with absolute certainty that humanity had finally done something truly right. They'd reached across the universe with open hearts and honest words, and the universe had reached back.